After nearly 2 decades, the dark razor edge of Johnny Depp's most intense Gothic turn is finally getting the high-definition treatment it always deserved. Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the 2007 R-rated collaboration with Tim Burton, has just set a brand new limited edition 4K steelbook release for September. And fans who never stop talking about those blood-soaked musical sequences are already lining up. This is not a remastered soft-focus version of a safe classic. This is the same raw, uncompromising vision that made audiences shift in their seats the first time The Blade came out. What happens when a film this bold finally arrives in the sharpest quality yet? The answer is already cutting through the noise. The announcement of this limited edition 4K steelbook for Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, arriving in September has already started conversations among people who first experienced the film in theaters back in late 2007, and those discovering it now through the new physical release. What stands out immediately is how the project itself was never designed as safe entertainment. When Tim Burton approached the adaptation of the Stephen Sondheim stage musical, he and Johnny Depp had already worked together several times, and both understood the material demanded a level of commitment that went beyond the usual period costume drama. Depp has spoken openly in interviews about the fear that came with accepting the role. He admitted he had never really sung before in any professional capacity, and described the early demos he recorded in a friend garage studio simply to prove to himself and to Burton that he could stay in key. The process was not glamorous. He recalled feeling mortified at the idea of performing the songs live on set rather than simply lip-syncing to pre-recorded tracks. Sondheim himself had advised that the emotional truth mattered more than perfect vocal technique, yet Depp still treated the singing as a genuine risk. That honesty is part of what keeps the performance grounded. Rather than turning Sweeney into a larger-than-life theatrical villain, Depp and Burton focused on stillness. The character barely looks people in the eye and speaks only when necessary. Depp explained in one conversation that they saw him as the original victim whose family had been taken and whose life had been destroyed by a corrupt judge. The white streak in the hair was meant to mark the trauma of those years in prison. The heavy makeup around the eyes suggested a man who had not truly slept in a long time. These choices came from discussions between the actor and the director rather than from any desire to create a perfect anti-hero. Helena Bonham Carter, as Mrs. Lovett, brought her own layer of quiet desperation to the pie shop sequences, and the partnership between the two characters feels lived in rather than forced for dramatic effect. Alan Rickman as Judge Turpin delivered the cold authority the story required without tipping into pure caricature. The production itself faced real interruptions. During filming, Depp's daughter Lily Rose became seriously ill, and he later recalled calling Burton to say he might have to leave the project. Burton's response, according to Depp, was immediate support and a willingness to adjust the schedule so the work could continue once the family situation stabilized. That kind of practical loyalty between collaborators rarely makes the final marketing materials, yet it shaped the atmosphere on set. The finished film carries an R rating for its graphic sequences of violence, and that rating was never softened. The story follows a barber returning to London after years of wrongful imprisonment, determined to settle accounts with the man who destroyed his family. The musical numbers sit inside a world of fog-damp streets and blood that is never treated as stylish decoration. Audiences in 2007 responded with a mix of admiration and unease. The film earned Johnny Depp a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy and an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, while the production design took home an Oscar. The worldwide box office reached roughly $153 million against a $50 million budget, which at the time represented a solid return for a dark musical that refused to lighten its tone. Yet the numbers only tell part of the story. What has kept people returning to the film over the years is the sense that every major creative decision was made in service of a specific emotional reality rather than broad commercial appeal. Depp has described the character as already dead inside long before the first throat is cut, and that internal emptiness is what makes the quiet moments land harder than the more explosive ones. The new 4K Steelbook arrives at a moment when physical media releases of older titles often focus on nostalgia alone. This one instead invites another look at the technical craft, the careful framing, the deliberate pacing, and the way the score and the performances lock together. Watching the film again in higher resolution does not change the fundamental choices, but it does make the textures of the sets, the fabric of the costumes, and the precision of the camera moves more apparent. The limited edition nature of the Steelbook has already created the usual pre-order interest, yet the real draw remains the work itself. For anyone who first saw the film as a teenager or young adult, the return of this particular title in a fresh format offers a chance to measure how their own reaction has shifted. The darkness feels less like spectacle and more like a consistent point of view. The humor, when it appears, is dry and rooted in the characters rather than in broad jokes. The singing that once felt risky now registers as an extension of the same commitment that shaped every other element. Depp never claimed the role was easy or that the process was free of doubt. In interviews, he has been clear about the initial terror of the vocal demands and the relief that came only after the early recordings proved workable. That transparency is useful. It keeps the conversation around the film honest, rather than turning it into another chapter of uncomplicated praise. The Gothic atmosphere Burton created is specific to the Victorian setting, yet the emotional core, the sense of a life narrowed down to a single driving purpose, is something many viewers still recognize. The new release does not rewrite any of that history. It simply places the same material in front of audiences with sharper detail and invites them to decide again how the pieces fit together. The Steelbook packaging, the restored picture, and the continued availability of the special features from earlier editions all serve the same purpose of keeping the original vision accessible. 19 years after the theatrical debut, the film still refuses to soften its edges, and that refusal is what continues to separate it from safer period pieces of the same era. The conversations starting around the September Street date already show people revisiting favorite sequences, discussing the balance between the musical form and the horror elements, and noticing details that earlier home video versions could not fully reveal. None of this requires exaggerated claims about perfection. The film has clear limitations and moments that some viewers still find extreme. Those reactions are part of its ongoing life. What the new 4K edition offers is simply another opportunity to sit with the work as it was made, and to hear again the choices that Depp, Burton, and the rest of the company made when they decided the only honest way forward was to lean into the darkness, rather than pull back from it. If you have not revisited Sweeney Todd in a while, the new limited edition 4K Steelbook arriving in September gives a clear reason to sit with it again on the biggest screen you can find. The picture and sound bring out details that earlier releases could not fully show, and the performance from Johnny Depp still carries the same quiet weight it did in 2007. Leave a comment with the moment that stayed with you the longest, or the reason you first connected with the film. If this kind of honest look at lasting work is useful, hit the like button and subscribe so you catch the next one. The Steelbook is already up for pre-order, and the film itself remains exactly as uncompromising as the day it first reached theaters.